Yeah. Well, I don't know whether or not it's someone's microphone either or someone's speaker. So it could be mine, but I don't
think it's good now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for who had to look at your devices. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Site Plan Review Committee subgroup on the Americana Hotel. It might be me. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting. My name is Daniel Weir. I'm the chair of the SPRC subgroup for this process. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting tonight, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted July 7, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for the Americana Hotel project are participating both here and in person and virtually through electronic means. SPRC subgroup members participating virtually include, will check over here. We are joined, and if I skip over your name, we'll have an opportunity to come back and you can let us know that you are in fact here. Sarah Steinberger, Elizabeth Gearin, John Aiken, Eric Cassell, and John Wall. We'll do electronic introductions momentarily, and I will invite you to speak up if we've missed you. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment to cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone, and please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, thank you. Please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. One for SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and two for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who were planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. Additional notes for members of the SPRC subgroup. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed on and raise your virtual hand in Teams. This will help us monitor your participation and serve as an indicator that you will need to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please, when we do introductions, not just announce your name, please let us know that you're participating specifically by phone. And when you speak, please also announce, when you speak in the course of discussion, please announce your name and the group that you are representing. And we will verbally check to see if you wish to be recognized, as you do not have the video feed for that option. So actually, I'm going to take that out of order and just take a moment to open the floor for anyone who is, are we joined by anyone purely via telephone? I don't see any phone numbers up there.
No.
Okay. And some additional notes for our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment. For our members, you will be called upon to speak on at the end of the meeting and allotted between 2 and 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat. For virtual attendees, or provide staff with your name if in person. We'll see. And lastly, any of you will be added to the speakers list. And lastly, please remember that this is a public forum. This evening's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. So again, I am Daniel Weir. I am chairing the SPRC process for this project. And I am going to go clockwise to Mr. Lamb, going around the table, then we'll catch the perimeter, and then we'll go online and catch the people who are online. So Mr. Lamb.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Lamb, and I'm the lead planner for this project.
Hi, I'm Jim Lantelme, member of the Planning Commission.
Hi, Cindy Lewin. I'm here on behalf of C2E2.
Good evening, I'm Leo Sarli. I'm with the Planning Commission.
Good evening, Chris Slatton, the Transportation Commission.
Steve Zockwell, with Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
Hi, Van Hein. Good evening, and I'm with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Michael L., Crystal City Citizens Review Council.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ross here with JBG.
Sorry, just writing the notes.
Angela Sedani with the architect, BKL Architecture.
Adrienne McCray, Lee and Associates, Landscape Architecture.
Olivia Sontag, I'm a planner with CPHD and just here to help Kevin on background.
Kendrick Whitmore, I'm with Vanderbilt representing the applicant.
Jack Kelly with JBG Smith.
Malcolm Williams, JBG Smith. Bucky Green, county resident.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Bucky Green,
Okay.
county resident.
I'm Haley Norris. I'm kind of behind the column, but I'm here on behalf of the Housing Commission.
Okay. Can you give me your name one more time?
Haley Norris.
Oh, Haley. Okay. I misheard your first name. Thank you for indulging me. Did I get everyone in the room? Yes. So let's go to, I think what I want to do just to get the order is if you are online and only online, and you, please just raise your hand and turn on your video screen, and we'll go by order of hands as they're raised. Except for Commissioner Steinberger, I'm going to call on you. Okay, you raised your hand. I'm going to call on you right away.
Oh, hi, I can't go on video right now, but Sarah Steinberger, Planning Commission. Sorry for crying, baby.
I know that sound. Mr. Aiken.
Hi, John Aiken, Historical Affairs Landmark Review Board. My video doesn't seem to be working right now.
Okay. John. Guest. You're on mute.
There we go. John Wall representing Aurora Highlands Civic Association.
Thank you. Aiken, Mr. Cassell.
It's Castle, just so you know. Eric Castle with Crystal City Civic Association.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. I should know that by now. Mr. Matuzak.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Matt Matuzak with the Planning Division, also supporting Kevin on this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. O'Hara.
Good evening, everyone. Mike O'Hara here with Bowler. We are the civil engineer representing the applicant.
Ms. Meyer, I believe.
Hi, this is Stacy Meyer. I'm with Aurora Highlands Civic Association. John Wall is our lead tonight.
Thank you for confirming that. Mr. Rose.
Hi, Michael Rose. I'm with BKL Architecture, the architecture firm.
And my apologies in advance, Mr. Godboll. I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Mayur Godbole with JBG Smith.
And Ms. Fuller.
Carol Fuller, back up to Mike Dowell on CCCRC.
You're fine, Jeff. Hi there.
And Ms. Smith.
Hi, Christy Smith with JBG Smith.
Now, have I skipped over anyone, or is anyone? Okay, Mr. Aiken, and there was one other person. You still have your hands up in Teams. Just that. I think that we are good to go, so I'm going to turn it over then to Mr. Lamb.
good. So I'll just provide a brief overview of staff's presentation that was posted to the website last week. As a reminder, the 3 discussion topics for tonight include site design and layout, building height, form, and architecture, and then open space and landscape. So first I wanted to go over the Crystal City sector plan guidance as it relates to the first 2 topics for discussion. So that's the sector plan notes. Tower coverage and building envelopes play an important role in creating attractive architectural facades and framing walkable and pedestrian-oriented streets. So since there's no effective cap on density per the sector plan, collectively, build-to lines, building height, tower coverage, tower separation, and tower setback parameters are the factors that will help determine achievable densities. So as a result, design guidelines were established to ensure new development is consistent with the goals of the sector plan. While the proposed site plan complies with recommendations for building height, podium height and separation, and tower coverage and separation, staff have identified preliminary issues related to adequately engaging the recommended build-to line on 8th Street, as well as incorporating additional setbacks above the podium. So per the sector plan, all podiums should engage the RBL for a minimum of 80% of the street frontage, and no portion of the podium facade should be located greater than 10 feet from the RBL. As proposed, approximately 48% of the podium facade engages the RBL, with a portion of the podium facade located approximately 48 feet from the RBL. So in addition, every building should have at least 1 podium frontage on an RBL for a minimum of 65 feet. This proposal is slightly short at approximately 62 feet. And then lastly, the sector plan recommends incorporating additional setbacks above the podium to create well-defined block edges that frame the streetscape, promote inviting streets, and ensure adequate sunlight for public spaces. Both the East Street frontage and Richmond Highway frontages lack consistent and adequate setbacks above the podium. So this is further exemplified through these next couple slides. So on 8th Street, on the East Street frontage, while the 2nd and 3rd floor on the right side image are partially recessed from the podium, most of the tower isn't set back from the podium or is within approximately 4 feet. So in the second image, that yellow highlighted outline outlines the tower. And then in terms of Richmond Highway, on that frontage, only part of the tower above the podium is set back approximately 5 feet. So again, the second image there, the yellow line is the outline of the tower above. And then lastly, in terms of open space and landscaping, I did want to note that the applicant has recently prepared revised plans for the ground floor open space, which didn't quite make it into staff's presentation. However, staff will be reviewing the plans once it is submitted in our system, and the applicant did cover the recent changes in their presentation, and this topic will be up for discussion tonight. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to the applicant for their presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Erica Gonzalez, I'm a senior analyst at JBD.
Sure. Sounds like someone at the YouTube.
Yeah, that's my voice. I hit the wrong button, I'm sorry.
Well, kind of stole it. My name is Kirley Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. So I'll just jump right into it. Just a quick overview of the presentation that we had posted last week for SPRC. Starting off with the rendering from the northwest. So this is southeast, just to orient everyone really quickly. And I just wanted to remind people of a few of our key project metrics for our proposed development. So the zoning being CO Crystal City.
Hey, Kevin,
Yes.
can you ask the speaker to get closer to the microphone? They sound like they're far away.
I can do that, but then someone else has to mute. I can turn on my microphone.
Oh, the speakers here should be able to pick it up.
Do you want to trade for the phone?
Yeah, did you want to sit here? It should be able to pick it up.
Okay.
I think
Should
you
I
have to
speak
speak
up?
up.
Just
a little
speak
bit.
up.
Try speaking. Okay. If I speak at this volume, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
It sounds like you just.
Okay. Anyways, really sorry about that. I'll project my voice a little bit more. Just repeating some of the project's metrics that are here on the slide. CO Crystal City for the zoning, the height being 200 feet, which as a reminder is 100 feet shorter from the Met's office right across the street. Our current design reflects 525,000 of residential gross floor area, which is 636 units. Additionally, we have 3,800 square feet of retail facing the southeast facade. And for parking, we have a 0.62 ratio, half of it being on site below grade, and the other half being at the Bartlett, which has some not utilized parking and is only about a 3 to 5 minute walk depending on your pace. So after sharing those quick metrics, I actually just wanted to kick it off to BKL to talk more about the site design.
Thank you, Carolina. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Angela Spadoni, and I'm with BKL Architecture. And again, thank you for all your comments and feedback. It's a big part of the design process, engaging the community, hearing what your input is. And we want, especially the site plan to be the best it can be because it's what everyone experiences. So just to orient everyone, on the screen, north is up, to the left is Eads Street or west, and to your right is Richmond Highway to the east. So the top plan is what we originally posted, and then the lower plan is what we revised and what we showed in the most recent online engagement. A few things that stay consistent is, as Carolina mentioned, that activation along Eads, really trying to front that as much as possible with retail. We know we have a very narrow site here, and we really want to activate Eads Street with retail and make sure that is visible as possible. We also have our main residential entrance off of Eads as well. It is set back. I will speak to that in a bit. But what we now to talk about what we revised and through feedback, we heard a lot of comments about wanting to also activate the Richmond Highway. Because as we know in the proposed condition, it would make more sense not to have residential units along there like you pointed out. So one of the things we have proposed is to remove that amenity space previously located to the center of the building, as you see on the top plan, and relocate that to the east along Richmond Highway, really trying to activate that. We also heard feedback about adding an additional residential entrance to that side as well to, again, continue to activate that, that street along Richmond, especially when it's lowered. And so you can see just indicated right now by a black arrow that we are working on that. We're going to be having a fitness center and a lounge through that entrance. Thank you. And then the other feedback we heard was wanting a public access between Eads and the future Richmond Highway along the north side of the site. So on the lower plan, you're seeing that implemented here as well. That is now will be open to the public in the future condition, and there will be a really beautiful connection that we're going to be working with LAI on. Right. And then this is just showing that future Richmond Highway condition. So the main thing to point out here, and can you see mine? Yeah, you can see mine a little bit. It's going to be a little slow. But here is this corner here, where it's now connected to the Richmond Highway. It's basically level with our building, ground floor, and that connection will go all the way through from Eads to Richmond, just like the feedback we were given. So looking at the rendering on the left, this is showing the amenity not moved to the east. So this was showing residential units. And then on the right, it's really highlighting that podium activation. So it does a couple things. One, we achieved activation like we heard that we wanted along Richmond in the feedback, but it also started to extend the building and sorry, you got that? Okay. Extend the building and it started to address some of what Kevin was speaking to about that podium expression along Richmond and the setback. So here you're starting to see that the podium of the tower is beginning to expand to the north where it wasn't on the image on the left. So by achieving activation along that ground floor, and then you can also see, thank you, how that area is highlighted now, what we address. That fitness moves there, we'll have a building entrance there. We have that through connection in the future condition that connects Eads all the way to Richmond. Again, this is our preferred option. We think it's an improvement on the building for both a visual architectural standpoint and then also a functional standpoint. And then this is just showing it in its current condition where Richmond Highway is existing. And on the right, it's still our preferred option. Again, we think activating that east side like you suggested and also extending that podium has really helped the presence of the building. And then just zooming in a little bit closer, this is both images now shown is with that extended podium, that fitness activated along the east. Since this is our preferred option, we wanted to show you how that looks in both the existing Richmond condition on the left and the proposed Richmond condition on the right. And, you know, again, activating that with a residential entry, activating that with fitness, getting that throughway through from Eads to Richmond, letting the public be able to access that really helps, you know, bring a life to the east side of the building. And then another of the comments that we got a lot of feedback on through the community was the entry sequence and the location of the entry and this canopy structure and questions about and understanding that. So I just wanted to take a couple seconds to kind of explain the design move of that, because it's something we're very excited about. This canopy structure we designed as a way to kind of bring the scale of the building down and create a podium, kind of hold that right to build line, hold that street edge, and bring the scale of the building down to a more pedestrian level. It lets light and air in. It is a canopy. It's an open structure. But what you see in this rendering is that the building actually extends through this canopy structure in certain areas to provide protection and coverage. So as you enter into that 48-foot back entry, residential entry, you're not completely open to the air. You are under protection. You are under coverage. We think this offers a really unique transition and kind of a threshold as you enter the building. And it's not only activated by the residents, but we also have let the retail spill out to the north. So it's kind of this dual purpose that we think is going to make a really interesting space that has activation from the retail, but it doesn't interrupt residents. This way the retail doesn't interrupt the flow along Eads, that we already are dealing with a very narrow sidewalk that has been, you know, requested to be widened. So we didn't really want to interrupt that with retail. So we really think the exterior retail along the north is where it should be. And then activating that with the residential entry, we think is going to make a very exciting and great, you know, entry experience for the residents and a retail experience there. I think. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Adrian, LAI.
Good evening, everyone. Again, it's Adrienne McCrae with LAI. And this is a view of our site looking from the southwest corner at the base of the building. And so our landscape plan really starts to incorporate multiple different levels of amenity space that are intermingled with planting areas, zones of planting that will have with trees as well as native ground cover. And we're using the different levels from the penthouse to the ground to create tree canopy that will help us meet our canopy coverage goals. We're also incorporating a number of different biophilitic design strategies that will help bring visitors and nature's connection with, visitors and our residents' connection with nature. And so some of the things that we're looking at are on our streetscape level on each street, really softening up that street as well as activating it. When we go around to the north side of north face of the building, we're also, again, we've got that covered amenity space that will also have some planting areas. And then as along that north face of the building, we're softening up that future connection to Richmond Highway. And that's the public access, but we also have a private area that's just south of that, where we have a garden and some outdoor deck terrace area right by our fitness center. The east and the south faces of the building will incorporate planting design that will also have stormwater management strategies integrated. And then we have a small dog relief area just off of the south part of the site. We also, in addition, have 3 different amenity areas on the roof, the second level, as well as 2 amenity spaces on the penthouse. And this view is looking at the East Street face. One of the things that's changed since the last presentation is now we've integrated a raised planter along the second level here, and that's basically wrapping around that whole edge to really soften the face of the building and the look from the streetscape. And this is that view underneath the covered ground area. The residential entrance is on one side, the cafe entrance is on the other, and we're incorporating some railing that has planting and as well as seating areas and opportunities to help really start to activate and soften that space. And just as a reminder, there's also that open space that's just to the north of the site. So we have some shared views there that really help to soften up the entire area. And then finally, we've got a night view of our southwest corner. And one of the things we want to really point out is on that second level, we have a number of green screens that were integrated in between those private terraces. And so that really helps to, again, soften up this face of the building. Thank you.
Is that everything from the applicant? Right. Thank you, Mr. Lamb, Ms. Pistrastis, Spadoni, and McCray. Am I butchering anyone's name too badly? I believe that we are now good to go to the table, unless I'm missing anything. The way that I like to do this, I hope you'll indulge me, is I like to sort of just go around, literally go around the table 2 times. Some people do popcorn. I have less success with that as a facilitator. And what I want to invite people to do, we have virtual participants at the table as well, and so I'm going to start with y'all, and then rely on you to raise your hands and get your videos on. Thank you. I see that's already starting. And then we'll come to the physical table. I'm going to go around the room, virtually and physically, twice. Really want to invite people to focus the first trip around on factual and clarifying questions, with the idea being that we get to comments or direct feedback on the second trip around. And as always, there is no reason you can't pass if you have nothing to ask or say. And we'll start with Commissioner Mattelli. Actually, I lied. We are, in fact, going to start with Mr. Wall, I believe, is John Guest, correct?
Yes, I'm apparently in disguise. I didn't realize that. No, it was helpful to get the to see the additional adjustments. I think, the feedback being taken on the north side connecting Eads over to the Richmond Highway connection makes sense. And I think we'll get to this later, but in talking about sort of the grounds, the open space and landscaping, when we talk about amenities, I'm just confirming those are amenities for the building specifically, not necessarily amenities for the community that we have yet to discuss. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I will hold my questions. I think pertain more to the density request and sort of the community environment that's going to be proposed that I have yet to see the specificity for. So I'll pass along.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. What I failed to mention something is that I want to do this sort of twice around for each of the 3 topics. So let's focus. I'm glad that you held off because you reminded me by saying that you were going to hold off to specify that we are going to start with a trip around specifically relating to site design and layout. Again, my fault for not clarifying. Mr. Castle.
Sure. Can you tell me that path from Eads to Route 1, how wide is it? That's a first question. And a second question is just broadly, what's the square footage of the areas that we're talking about for both the private amenities and the public amenities? So those are two quick questions.
Whoever can
answer that. The path is about 10 feet wide. I mean, we're still working on, there is going to be required a railing on the north side and some things, but right now we're at 10 feet. I don't know if that will be exactly 10 feet clear, but around 10 feet wide. As for the amenities, I don't have the areas on there, but I could try to look and get back to you on that. If that's okay.
Thank you. I believe then that unless Mr. Castle, you have any other questions, I'm going to go to Commissioner Lantelli.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. 2 of them relate to the pedestrian path and 1 to design the building. For the pedestrian path, first, is it going to be a permanent public easement? Second, until Richmond Highway is brought to grade, where does it go? It just goes to a wall. But explain that. And as far as the design goes, the entrance to the lobby, it's set back, which I get. Is that partly because it would allow outdoor eating space under the canopy, under the building, because the sidewalk would be too narrow to allow outside dining there, or not sufficient space for outside dining? So those are my 3 questions.
Okay, 3 questions. May I have to help me remember this?
The first 2 were about the pedestrian path. First, is it a permanent public easement?
So on the first question related to these, no, we haven't gotten to that level of discussion with the staff yet. And then in terms of it moving to Richmond Highway, I'm sure Angela will have some comments too, but that a lot of our design choices have had to been to look at both the existing conditions and then those future conditions.
Right, I got that.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. It makes a huge amount of sense when Richmond Highway gets
Yes.
brought to grade, but until it is, where does that go? How do you, when you walk down it, you're at a wall and it's a dead end?
Right.
Okay.
Well, you're not on a wall. There's a grade change. So you would be about,
can't get up the
exactly.
wall.
So in the current condition,
Right, no, but there would be an entrance to like the amenities space.
the amenity
right?
space
So
for
everyone
the
just-
residents,
Not
doesn't
walking
make
the building,
sense.
and skip that.
The average person, they're not gonna go there because they
That's
can't get
correct.
into the building.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we did a lot of studying about the exterior retail space that we really wanted to do to activate the streetscape. Due to the sidewalk width, it is not impossible, but it is challenged. We're left with about 3 feet wide width there. And we just felt that with the way that customers would move furniture on their own and,
Right.
whatever, they, have their dogs with them and on the side, like, it just wasn't practical. And so that was why we thought, oh, this will be a great design opportunity to move it to the north, make it interactive with the residents, and really make it a really unique space. So that was why. It was
Okay, I
challenged.
mean, it makes sense. So to confirm what I thought was going
Okay,
on.
great.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll save my questions for the open space.
Thank you. Commissioner Sapp.
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Slack.
I'm good on site design.
Blackwell.
This may be the appropriate place to ask this. Met Park is right across the street, and it's part of the Pentagon City sector plan. The tree canopy here is 18.8%, which sounds fine in the abstract. Do you know whether the Pentagon City sector plan has any tree canopy targets? And I'm asking staff about this.
I'm not familiar myself, but I know Matt Matuzik is on the line.
Okay,
If
good,
he
Matt.
knows off the top of
Good to
his
hear.
head, or we can follow up separately.
Can you just repeat if the question is about tree canopy guidance for this particular block?
No, for the Pentagon City sector. Is there tree guidance for this block? I assume not.
No, this one is outside. And I can double check on the block where Met Park is located, what the tree canopy requirements were. They were distinct depending on which sites we were looking at. I can provide that in the chat.
Okay.
Jim already asked my question about pedestrian entrance. And the canopy question is going to be with architecture next.
With open space and landscaping.
The physical canopy
Oh, the physical, yes, so that would be,
next.
Architecture.
can't imagine how that wouldn't be that, yes, so that would, yes.
Thank you.
And I have no comments.
Okay. Oh, Haley, Ms. Norris, Commissioner Rhodes.
I'm sorry, I'm good for now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. I think actually my question has to do with building. My question might have to do with open space and landscaping. I might have one that I have to come back to. I'm going to reserve the right to do that. Likewise, you know, if you have a question about, if you realize in 15 minutes that you had a question about site design and layout, let me know. We'll come back to it. We're all friends here most of the time. I think then that we go to building height and architecture, unless there's anyone who needs to be heard on, still on site design layout. We will start. Do we have anyone online who wants to raise a question on this one? Mr. Castle.
Just real fast, how many units and what size of units? Is that the right is this the right place to ask that question?
Oh, yes, but I'm going to actually put a pin on that because I forgot that I said that we were going to go around a second time for any comments. So I want to quickly just scan, not seeing any nods, so no questions, no comments. All right, Mr. Castle's question, that's probably the applicant, I would assume.
So 636 units. 636 units and about 680 average square foot unit size. We're still working through all the exact dimensions on the plan.
So do you know how many 1 bedrooms versus 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, that type of thing?
So this is Kedrick Whitmore, the entitlement and the density associated with CO Crystal City is on an FAR basis, a floor area ratio basis, not on a unit basis. So we're still nailing down the exact unit mix. And of course, that will have some impact on certain calculations such as parking ratio, that sort of thing. But no, we don't have the exact ratio, the number of each type of unit nailed down, again, because we're getting our entitlement on a GFA or FAR basis rather than a unit basis.
I might have a follow-up on that when we get to it if someone else doesn't pick up on it. Do we have anyone else online who's Ms. Meyer? We'll go to you. You may be on mute, and if we have to come back to you, okay.
Hold on. No, hi. Sorry about that. I have a lag, so sorry about that. Question. This round is site design. So my question is a follow-up to John's, which is, was there any analysis done on the number of dogs expected in the building and this versus the size of the park, like you would do for cars? Does that metric exist? And I've seen things in 30-50% of buildings may have pets. 30% of the units may have pets in some of the research I've done. Is that what you're seeing, or how did you make the assumption about the dog park size?
That's Stacy. Just speaking, I can take that really quick. So Stacy, this is Jack Kelly. I'm with JBG Smith. So we don't have that information today. I'll tell you that we're happy to go back and work with our asset management group that oversees a lot of our residential units across the kind of DMV and see where we shake out. I think we've heard this as an ongoing concern. Obviously for us, we're a little bit lucky that we have Met Park across the street with fairly generous space for dogs. This site is fairly constrained just geographically, just by the pure dimension. So I don't know if we have it up or need to show it, but there's a small dog relief area just for the kind of, very basic needs for people who have dogs who don't want to walk across the street. But I think it's one of the things that we'll have to factor in operationally as we hopefully get closer to delivering on this. But we're happy to kind of come back and share anecdotally what we've seen in some of our buildings, if that's helpful.
May I follow up?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm not sure of all the rules here. So yeah, so I live near a public park where a lot of people bring their dogs on leash and off leash. And definitely we're concerned in Aurora Highlands and our parks. I know we've got a new dog park, which is awesome, but definitely not everybody uses that park. And with all of the buildings going up, and we love dogs, we love cats and all their dogs. I think we should be thinking about planning for these animals in the same way we plan for everything else, because people will end up overcrowding the public parks as well. They don't have good spaces.
Okay, noted. We'll circle back with some additional thinking on how we kind of came to what we're currently proposing.
And Ms. Mayor, I would, without intending to, with apologies in advance if I sound as if I'm calling out, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, I would like to, my understanding is that Mr. Wall is the Aurora Highlands representative, and would like to invite you, and this is on me for missing it, would like to invite you to focus any comments or questions that you have either through Mr. Wall, just as the representative at the table, or in public comment. Shoot me an email or text or Mr. Lamb if I've misunderstood anything. And again, apologies if I try not to.
Sorry, I thought we had 2 seats at the table, but I must be missing.
CA has 1.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, unfortunately, John and I are in different locations. It makes it a little bit challenging. So, sorry about that.
It's my job is to have noticed it, and I noticed it too late. So
yeah, the intent was good. Sorry,
is on me. I'm going to go next to Mr. Aiken.
Hi, I am sorry I cannot get my camera to work tonight. So I think this was probably the most appropriate area for us to ask our question. I wanted others to ask their questions first. Have there been any efforts for historic preservation with this site?
Who do you, Mr. Lamb, do you want to take that first, or do you want to have the applicant take that first?
And it's,
so I'm happy to answer this, Kevin. So hey, John. So this question has come up a few times. I'll tell you that in terms of
can you just say your name one more time, just because you're not at the, I think you're just out of view. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just identify yourself.
Oh, Jack Kelly with JBG Smith. So this has come up a number of times in our kind of early planning stage here. I think clearly it's a landmark historically as you come into Crystal City. And maybe we'll get to a point where we can talk a little bit about how we've taken some of that inspiration and tried to incorporate that into the design. But in terms of what's there today, I think the things that we're hearing are important to kind of be thoughtful about are the sign and the name itself. And so I can say that unfortunately today we don't have definitive control over all of the fixtures on the property just yet. We're currently working with the seller to figure out what an arrangement might look like to take possession of those over time. We'll know more in the first quarter of next year. I think the other piece of that is the name. So we started to look into this as well. There's a bunch of legal, process we need to work through. Unfortunately, the name Americana, believe it or not, is trademarked in California, and so it does prevent us from using that free and clear to name the building the Americana. And so I think in the context of the sign and what might be the fate of that, I think we want to figure out the naming piece of it first, because it would be clearly confusing if we had a Americana sign in the building and the building was named something else. So I think in the next SPRC, we'll have more information on the intent of the family that's selling the building or has sold the asset to us as it relates to whether or not they want to retain some of the furniture and things like the sign that might be interesting to keep around and find a thoughtful use for.
Sure. That actually answers a lot of everything, so that helps out quite a bit. And I think really the comment we have is we've sort of admitted our public comment noting the difficulty with the sign. So we are happy to engage with you in any way for historic preservation, and thanks.
I don't see any more hands. Commissioner, want to tell me?
Yeah, I understand from reading the staff report that there's still some question about setback. And that if in fact it has to get pushed back somewhat, can this building, to keep the same density, go taller on this side? Or is it maxed out at the height for this use?
I believe it is maxed out at height.
So regardless of how you squish it, it can't go any taller?
Correct.
Okay. That was my question.
The board doesn't have discretion to allow additional height. It's the technical. And is what you're saying is yes. Is that, I'm looking at both, I'm getting a yes from Mr. Wood.
They do not have the discretion to increase the height.
Okay. Thank you for raising that, Commissioner Tony. Commissioner Sauer?
I'm good for now, thanks.
Commissioner Slack? Good. Commissioner Zappa?
Is this time for canopy?
Is that architecture? The physical canopy, yes. Yes.
I understand how the canopy creates this really beautiful kind of a pseudo massive podium effect, and that's really cool. And I noticed how it's designed through the light creates a similar pattern to the way that you designed the northern face, and that's really good. But I don't get the structure. I would love to see a model of it and how it interacts with the building. I want to know the dimensions of each piece. I mean, it's not a table, it's not solid. I try to think about it, and it's not there.
I think we need to
little
beef that up a bit, yeah.
That.
Yeah,
And maybe go back to that.
So it goes lot line to lot line from the north to the south. So you're seeing it go there. It doesn't go, it only extends back, I can't remember how many feet, about that 50 feet back. But you're right, it is not solid. It's meant to create a sense of scale, to create a sense of presence along eaves, to create an extended podium, to allow light and air, just really this interactive element for the pedestrians, the pedestrian scale that is just diversifies the building. We really think it's exciting, really beautiful. But you mean like how it's structurally set up?
Well, what its dimensions are, I mean, there's 12 different sections.
Oh, how many like fins there are? There's around 12, yeah. And we are kind of working.
How wide are they? How wide is the space in between?
And we are
made of?
Yeah, okay, all of these things we are working on, and maybe the next one we can get a little bit more definition on.
Yeah.
But it is not meant to be walked through. It is meant to be a directional.
Yeah.
It's meant to let light and air through. As you can see, it's meant to screen in certain areas. Like on the south side, we're up against a lot of really not very attractive loading dock and garbage. So we're trying to use it as a screening development there. We're trying to use it as directional development on the north side, where it's pulling you into the pedestrian lobby and then helping frame that retail. But we don't want it to block the retail, so you're letting it kind of set and float around and above, and just kind of really create this beautiful sculptural element.
And how it actually intersects with the buildings.
Well, I mean, that's our job as an architect as we move along to make sure that's done correctly. The materiality we're also still working on. Well, it does interact with the building, so it is partially using the structure. It will be partially using the structure of the building. And then, I mean, we're working with structural engineers to figure that out as well.
Is it probably going to be concrete?
We're working on there's a couple options. I mean, it could be concrete, it could be steel encased in concrete, or encased in some type of material. So it could be metal, it could be precast. We're kind of looking at all of those options.
It's a massive space. And I guess what I have two comments. Is that the best way to have this much structure to get the effect that you're looking for? Could you do it with less than 12?
I mean, yeah, so we've looked at the depth of it, but we feel that this is scaled and proportional to the building itself. If it gets too thin, it doesn't make as much sense anymore. But this, we thought, from what the purpose of it is as creating this entry into the building, kind of some screening on the south and helping ground. You have to look at the tower itself, how long it is, and just we've really worked through a lot of iterations of this, and we feel that we are at a good point with it in terms of its conceptual that will work with the structural. We'll be able to get this to work as it looks in the rendering and not have to add a ton of additional support or heavy beams coming across to help support it. So we have early studies of that we're confident that we can get to what we're showing you on the screen. We wouldn't want to present something that we didn't think we could make happen. So definitely more details to be solved, but we think that the current scale and its function is really what hitting the use that we were looking for it to do. And we really think it's a differentiator of the building, and we're very excited about that.
Thank you. More details.
Okay.
My final comment, which I think was in Kevin's report as well, is how setback pedestrian entrances.
Yes.
I do not support that
Okay.
at all. Especially since that's the main entrance. I'm not aware that there's anything on the south side that you can use to get in.
Currently, there will be. We added right on the south side of the building. There is an entrance off the dog ribbon area.
Okay, that wasn't clear. So that's
yes, there is.
And thank you for adding the entrance on the other side.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a great suggestion. We don't have a black arrow there because it's more of a back of house entry. I'm just sharing their screen, but between the right there on the screen is an additional entry. Again, it is a long building, so that's why we have two cores. That's why we have the entry there. So there is an additional entry. And we feel that, setting back, I know that there's been some questions about how far we're setting back residential entry, but we feel like it really helps make the retail visible and makes it a little bit more of a boutique entrance. It's not, smack in your face. It lets you have a little bit of a transition before the building, lets you have a canopy and coverage while you're waiting for, pickup drop off. That is a little bit more sheltered, but still outside without having just a canopy that hangs off a building. It's a little more of a unique approach. So we think this is appropriate distance to walk. We walked it, we counted it, we were happy with it, but I understand the feedback and it's a little off the norm, so it's
not off the
norm.
If you're healthy young people, and if you are somebody with disabilities and impairments, all those extra feet that you have to do every day, they start adding up. So if you bring it out, that would be.
If we brought it out, you'd still do those feet, you'd just be indoors doing those feet, right? Because we're not going to be moving the core or anything. But yeah, understood. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Dowell?
Two questions. Well, one to follow up, since my interest is that peak.
Okay.
Are you designing like a pergola to actually track with the sun and give some shade at the right time of day, or is that incidental?
It's definitely, shadow and light was an obviously design driver of this element. We just think that it's going to create a really beautiful experience, as we tried to show in the rendering, as the sun moves out through the day. It is not supposed to be anything that is, tracking the sun or responding to the sun. It started out as trying to guide views. Again, the south side of the site is not very attractive, so we were trying to think of a way, how do we screen, the Paramount's condition that we can't change? How do we guide people into the building? How do we orient these fins in certain ways? So in some ways it looks more solid, in some ways it looks more light and airy. You can't actually walk through it, but it helps guide you into the entrance and let light in, all those things.
Thanks. And then I have one other comment. I'm not really sure where it goes, but I thought I would just put it on the table. Where the Route 1 discussion is putting a tremendous amount of energy into bike lanes. And so you're going to have bike lanes just to the east of this this structure. I'm wondering, people who have bikes in this building, they want to get to that bike lane right now, not really clear where the bikes are being stored and how they would get out to Route 1, or even if that's desirable. And I'm not sure what category that question is.
We'll treat that as a callback to site design and layout, and we'll treat the question as seeking clarification for bicycle ingress and egress, unless you think I'm doing violence to your question. And I don't know who, bad metaphor for bicycle.
Yeah, I think maybe just point out the bike routes you could put on the plan.
So we don't have the plan. It's on the lower level. And it can be accessed from either of the cores and really any entrance, but obviously they're going to be coming off the eaves. but they could take the south along the loading and get into that core on the south. Nice job, Carolina. So the lower levels of the parking, the green is where our bike parking is. We did study it. We did try to find space for it on the ground floor. It is, we're limited there, and on the long, narrow site, we wanted to get lighting views into rooms that deserve lighting views, activate the spaces that needed to be activated. So to us, the most sense it made to go on the lower levels. So that is where we're planning for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Norris?
No, thank you.
I have two questions. Let's go back to the bike lane slide, if you would, please. Or not the bike lane slide, I'm sorry, the garage slide showing the bike storage area. Thank you. The answer to this may be that you're still working out the details, but I'm specifically curious about whether it looks like you've got very little parking spaces for securing the bikes by a rack or something like that. Are they all presently sized for like individual road bikes, or are you sizing them for some mixture of road bikes and cargo bikes, or are you not there yet, or something else?
Okay. We are not there yet. This is Malcolm Williams from JVG.
Thank you.
Something we're definitely studying. It's a great question, so we'll definitely add that to the list of items that we've heard this evening. But as a semi-bike enthusiast, it's a pretty good question.
The only follow-up I'd say is that we do have a fairly extensive residential design guideline, framework that we have that we've developed over a number of years managing buildings. And so the way we've sized that is consistent with the kind of practical use and storage needs that we see across kind of, on average, our portfolio. So the answer should be, it'll accommodate road bikes, mountain bikes, any number of types of two-wheel vehicles, right? But the specification for that rack system, is detail we haven't worked out yet.
Okay, I'm going to go to Commissioner Latelmi and then Lewin, and I'm going to, Commissioner Slatt, get ready to be called on in case you have anything to add to this discussion.
Follow up to Commissioner Weir, saying the different types of bikes. Do we also have facility for charging e-bikes in that bike room? Will you have some way that people can do that?
That's a great question. I would imagine that's something we can accommodate.
You're going to have to, because going forward,
there's a lot of those around.
I see more and more of those. I'm really.
And unlike a car,
quickly
you can.
yeah.
It's just a normal, wall outlet, right?
Right.
So I think we should be able to make that work.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, but that means more than one outlet.
No, that's right. No, we need to physically think about where they are. And all
right.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
100%.
Ms. Lewin.
Right. Well,
Is it
my
Ms. Lewin or
question-
Commissioner Lewin? My apologies if I've gotten you wrong.
No, you have it exactly right.
Okay.
My question is very similar. I thought as long as we had the garage slide up, are there, and I wasn't seeing it, but what about charging stations for electric vehicles? There for the cars, it's I don't know if that, but obviously that's something that some percentage will be decided on or has been decided on, and how will you?
We do have them. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it should be consistent with staff guidance on this.
We have 5%.
5%.
5%.
But the building should have the kind of future-proofed capability to add them over time as that, kind of shift happens over the years.
I agree, it should have, but will it have?
Well, it sounds like we have the 5%, and I
Yeah.
think we need to think in one layer down in detail as to where the additional capacity would come from. But from a utility perspective, the capacity should be right.
Before I get to Commissioner Slatt, Mr. Kelly, Commissioner Schroll is not here tonight. Were he here, he would point out the following, and I'm going to do you and him the favor of doing it for him, which is please anticipate questions at Planning Commission about whether you intend to pre-install conduit at parking stations where you are not yet planning on building out.
The answer is yes. Yes, we'll come with another
and transformer space.
The infrastructure.
That's correct.
Commissioner Slatt, we're sort of adjacent to transportation. It's the closest we're going to get on this SPRC agenda. So
I'll save any questions I have for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Question: what topic are we on?
So this is a site design, and we went back to site design and layout, right?
But where were we?
We were on on building height, form, and architecture. So it's, I mean, it is an architecture, it's an architecture question.
Sorry, so I
because
missed
it's
that.
ingress and egress.
So when we get a chance, I'd love to go back to the architecture conversation.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
then the question that I have on, where is my question on building height, form, and architecture? I had another one, I've lost it. Well, yeah, we're gonna go around the second time. And so for our second time around, Mr. Cassell, I'm gonna start with you.
Great. What did you say those columns, those big columns in front? First of all, can you make sure I get the right name? And second is, did you say you didn't know what they were made of? Because that's kind of really important how they look as what material they're made out of. And I'm kind of curious that you haven't decided what they're made out of.
So the big columns, are tower columns coming down. And then, so those are the columns. Is that what you're asking? And then the canopy structure, yeah. So on the side, those are all a series of columns also, but not supporting anything but its own weight, like wind and snow and, you know, that kind of load. So there's going to be a materiality for structure, which will be cladded in a material. And the structure itself, you know, we're exploring that. Could be metal, could be some type of concrete, and then there'll be something cladding that as well. And we're also exploring that. We're exploring metal at the top. We're exploring precast down where you interact with it on a pedestrian level. You know, looking for a lighter weight material at the top. You know, it has to do with look and structure as opposed, you know, one and the same with design. So what are you experiencing at the pedestrian level? What helps us make it more buildable? You know, so those things we're all looking into right now.
I mean, to be honest with you, that's really, really key in looking at this as a design feature, because it's going to look vastly different with different materials.
Of course, yes. I couldn't agree more. Yes.
I'm going to go to Mr. Wall, I believe.
All right, so in our round 2, we're back to architectural, just checking where we are.
Yes, we sort of took the building form transition back to site design, but we are back to building height, form, and architecture.
Okay, so a couple of things back to the, you know, I think this is all related, sort of broadly speaking, to parking, then I'm assuming. We're looking at parking slots, what's going to be proposed in the building on site, 178 spaces, which when I do my math, 5% gets us to about 8 EV charging stations. So probably we'll have to go back and revisit that. But I think the question we're looking at is with the retail parking and the residential, like loading, the PUDO, sort of pick up, drop off. I think one of the things that I have yet to see is sort of how that's being accounted for with, you know, we're talking about that potentially being a cafe. I'm imagining, you know, Uber drivers pulling up, picking up food to deliver. So wondering where in the designs we're accounting for the fact that we're shrinking the amount of parking that's available, but also potentially creating the need for more parking around the building as a result of the retail and as a result of what we're doing with a very narrow front on East Street.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. So for everyone's benefit, the reason that I was a little bit flexible with what counts as transportation versus what counts as building form and design is because our agenda for the next meeting has one bullet, TBD. And since the applicant and staff were prepared to discuss site design layout, building height, form, and architecture, open space and landscaping. Mr. Wall, I want to take your question as an invitation, which I assume staff and the applicant will take us up on, to specifically bullet parking and transportation for the next item and anticipate answering that question at the second SPRC meeting, unless, Mr. Wall, unless there's anything else that you want to add, that's how I propose to proceed.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think right, it's sort of figuring out where these things slot in is, we'll continue to explore that, I'm sure.
Great, thank you very much for your flexibility. I want to go around the room. Commissioner Latell, and now this is, right,
Comment.
if you have additional questions, great, but comment is what's invited especially.
Okay, I think the architecture of this building, as far as I'm concerned, is really good. I'm very impressed with it. Clearly, it's a very interesting site given how long and narrow it is, but that sort of dictated how the building would go with the setbacks. I think it ended up working out really well because rather than have just one long skinny building, it has the serpentine look, which breaks it up, and I think that ended up being to its advantage. I really like the canopy. I think that's a signature element for this building and for East Street. It's raising the bar for East Street. When I walked around that site, the buildings around it are just really, they're just not, I mean, you don't even want to look at them. They're just really pretty ugly. This is like so much better than what's around it. It really raises the look. And when you go look across the street, the new Amazon buildings, it's of that level of quality. So it really makes East Street much more, having that canopy there will make walking on East Street much more interesting. And you'll know that this is that building. If anybody's trying to give directions, it's the building with the canopy, or the arch, whatever you want to call it. It shows up right away. Now that said, I do appreciate Commissioner Hines' concern about the front entrance there. I like buildings that you know right off the bat where the entrance is. Having it hidden back there is a bit of a challenge. I understand why you're doing it, and I support that. I think it makes sense to make sure the retail really is successful. So I would like, if there's some way you could have that recessed front door entry to the building somehow be signaled better than what it is now, that you know this is where you walk in the front door. I'd appreciate that. Having the new entrance on Richmond Highway, which in the future will be used a lot because that'll be the closest entrance to the subway. So I'm willing to bet that's going to almost have the heaviest usage. I lived in a building in Philadelphia where it had two entrances, and the main entrance wasn't always the one most people used because the other one was closer to Center City. So people would go out that back one. That's where people want to walk. So you're going to have a lot of use back there. So it's a really good idea putting that in. Again, that said, I saw the tweaks between the last iteration and the current. It's like fine. It was a high quality building anyway. As you can see, I'm very enthusiastic about the way this looks because it just raises the bar for the neighborhood, and I think it's going to be really important to help set the bar for the rest of East Street when everything redevelops. So, anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I was going to say something about the high quality of the work as well. I think it's a very attractive building. Obviously, it's built representing a huge amount of bonus density that we're going to figure out how it merits that. But I do think it's very attractive, and I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this.
Commissioner Sarli.
Thanks. I will concur with my commissioner's comments, but I will reserve the right to critique it a little bit. So I'm a little bit unsure about the canopy or trellis. One, I thought a canopy was an opaque roof, and so I'm not sure that we're using the right terminology, but that's something we can have offline just for fun. I think this is more of a trellis. So I have a few concerns with the sort of proportion, the scale, and the sort of rhythm, right, that the building is setting up. I think Commissioner Latell mentioned how the building sort of snakes through the site, which causes a certain amount of energy and kinetic sort of quality to it, which is good. I think there's a little bit of a conflict with that and the different grids and the different balconies and the different widths. And so I'm struggling to find the central theme, right? So like when you listen to Tannhauser, it starts with the theme, and then there's a bunch of variations, but you're always sort of anchored on that original theme, and you kind of know where you came from, and you kind of know where you are, and you kind of know where you're going, and you understand the variations. And right now, I'm struggling to find the theme. I'm struggling to find where the canopy connects to the circular stainless steel columns, where the glass sort of creates that buffer between the canopy and the sort of mass that's floating above it. I think even on the diagram where you have the vertical versus the horizontal, the sort of opaque versus the reflective aspects are sort of at odds with each other, creating sort of, or neutralizing, if you will, a little bit. And it could be a little bit of the rendering quality too, that I'm not sure. And then finally, there's a lot of angles, like on the canopy, there's the angled louvers aspect of it. You know, do those relate to the angles of the building? Can we tie those back in? And so I think there's a lot of really beautiful pieces. They're just not orchestrating together, if that makes sense. Hopefully my architecture speak is sort of translating through. And then on one of the diagrams, it's not on today's presentation, where you sort of harken back to the original motel and tried to pick up on the themes. I think that was a really brilliant gesture. I'm not sure it's scaled up quite that well, you know. So I'm wondering at what time, at what point you're sort of tying yourself in knots to try to harken back to this original architecture that is no longer of the same scale. You know, so I think there's a little bit of scale proportion in the joints where materials meet, where the canopy meets the glass, where the columns transverse the canopy. Like there should be a ripple effect there. There should be some sort of an impact. You know, they shouldn't just completely bypass each other. But other than that, I agree. I think this is a really nice sort of contribution to the site, to the street. And I generally like the sort of enclosure that creates. And I think the transition into the entrance and the way you tuck the garage doors in particular off to the side is really commendable and something that I was very excited to see. I think that's about it. Let me see if I have anything else. Yeah, I was a little concerned with the weight of the mass over the glass and how it transitions into the canopy. What is the theme? I think that's about it. Yes, thanks. And the grid. I think the grid versus the axiality, but I covered that. So thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Is this comments or am I supposed to?
It's up to you. You're welcome to retort, but then we run the risk of going down a rabbit hole.
We are advertised until 9, and I think we're making fairly good pace because of the unique situation of having an architect on the SPRC. I actually do kind of want to hear your feedback, but going to Commissioner Slant after.
Okay, I will.
Leo, that's directed to Leo, just to be clear.
I won't take long, and I don't think I'll be able to address all your comments because some of them I agree with, and we're working through that. Some of those are those connection details and how exactly does that canopy/trellis structure interact with the columns. We also had the canopy debate internally. It was what the public used, so we decided let's stick with it so that nobody gets confused about what we're talking about. We like to call it the tabletop, which has no reference to air or light or any type of anything technical. It was just throw out and it stuck. So that original slide that you're referring to has been, since removed from the presentation, but it was one of our really big sticking points for the origin of this design. And we really did want to do something that beckoned back to the hotel as much as possible when we were beginning in its initial phases. As the project progressed, that kind of grows into its own architecture, right? Because of the scale and everything. But we do feel that the tabletop was something that does reckon back or respect the original hotel. The other thing that we really wanted to look at was the proportionality of the building, and we actually narrowed it since once we submitted to the city back in April. We think it's a much nicer proportion, taller, thinner. It's very nice. And then we wanted to emphasize this kind of interlocking grid. So along the eaves facades, we did this combination of very horizontal and then a very vertical that then kind of turns the corners, transforms into this grid that carries back to the Richmond Highway side and then flips back to the horizontal and expression inverted. It is a very long facade, so we are working to break it up with the balconies that are working within the grid. As you can see here, as it turns the corner to the eaves, we thought about where views are. Let's make that more glassy. But I do think that the overall theme originally started with the Americana, and we worked on from there. The Americana has specifically very strong horizontal, not vertical, but again, it morphed as we worked through the design into becoming its own thing. But the story started there. I think the beauties and the details, I can't remember who I'm quoting there, so just bear with me. because I'm a bit nervous, but beauty is in the details, and that's the next part of the fun that we have to work through and make sure that it, that everything is thought through. Yes, how those circular columns are interacting with the with the tabletop. But I also think that a little bit of variety is nice. I think that you don't want everything to be a one-story, one-note story. So I like the kind of tension between a more soft curvilinear element and a more hard rectilinear element. I think there's a lot of beauty in that. You can see that the composition of this forefront is very boxy, so we really felt like letting those columns come through as a more soft element helps that composition as well. So I agree with you, there's still more work to be done, and definitely going to take your comments into consideration, but I just wanted to kind of say.
Thank you, that's great, that's really illuminating.
Thanks.
Chris, before I go to you, can I go to HALB?
Do it.
Thank you. Commissioner Rankin.
Yes, I just wanted to sort of echo some of the comments a little bit. It does look as though to me that the applicant has considered the sort of original design and intent of the building, and it's something that we've kind of mulled over and talked about a little bit as well. As long as they are taking efforts to work towards preservation, which they've already seemed to indicate that they've actually thought through a lot of issues even I hadn't even flagged tonight. I think that that's actually really, really positive, and we really look forward to working for them in the future. But I wouldn't want you guys to necessarily try to see yourself getting in some type of a Gordian knot, trying to accomplish something that was original in comparison to the old one. So if there's ways we can do preservation that are somewhat more flexible, I think that's something that we would certainly consider to work towards, if that's helpful feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Rankin. Commissioner Slack.
Thanks. As the transportation guy, I don't normally opine on architecture, but I feel the need to speak up for the trellis. I think it is essentially pedestrian infrastructure. I think it is what kind of orients the building to the pedestrian realm and invites people on the street to come in and experience the building. I think if you do it right, it's going to feel like an outdoor room, which is always what we're trying to achieve, and sometimes we do, mostly we don't. I really hope when you get into the design details that it ends up feeling warm material-wise, if you can incorporate as many green and biophilic features in there to make it feel natural and not like you're in a weird metal cave, which I feel like could happen. I think it's going to be great. If you can really get your address as big as it looks on this rendering, I think people are going to find the door no problem. Yeah, I think if it weren't for the trellis, this building would feel very imposing as a pedestrian passing by. I think it brings it down in a way that really helps. So I will stop opining about architecture and go back into my transportation bubble, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Stay in your lane,
A couple of comments. One is to just echo what Chris was just saying. The trellis, as it were, looks like it's going to be
Sorry about that.
I'm going to confuse that.
Looks like it's going to be a great pedestrian experience. But looking at the renderings sort of reminds me of walking down the Kennedy Center corridor. It has a certain air of monumentality about it. So I think it will be really important to put a lot of green and emphasize the warm structures of the wood and whatnot to make sure that it's not an austere experience. The other comment I had has to do with a portion of the architecture that we really haven't talked about very much. Understandably, there's a lot of emphasis on the eastern and western fronts and the north because of the passageway. But when we get to the treatment of the southern street, it's mostly, well, that's ugly, let's don't look at that. In fact, I don't think there are any renderings of that. I wonder if the applicant has an opportunity here to put up a structural roof over the loading dock and the garage there. It seems to me that it's an opportunity to put some green in that area. And there's a synergy with the green area along 8th Street. And it would be, I think, a great amenity, even if it's only accessible to the residents, to experience a lot more green. And they don't have to look at the ugly garage and loading and whatnot. So
I see that as an opportunity, and I would urge the applicant to consider that. Last comment, and there's no particularly good place to make this comment. Has the applicant done any consideration of Burford and Glass?
Yes.
Yes.
You intend to use that?
Well, we do.
Certain areas.
I can't remember the dimension in terms of height from grade, but 36.
8 feet to 26, and we are doing that as part of the sustainability portion that will be addressed at the next meeting with a diagram for
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay, it does seem that with Met Park right across the street and a lot of green area, that you're going to have some birds that are attracted to this building anyway, so good job.
I think the building's really attractive, and I think the changes that you've made are improving it, going in the right direction. I still have some issues with, I call them actually the croquet hoops.
The what?
Croquet hoops.
Croquet.
I mean, the rectangular croquet hoops.
I like it.
And I think maybe you can make them more delicate, but we're talking about making them greener, you know. I like the basic idea, but if you can reduce it and make it greener. Right now, I see it more as a barrier, but it's architecturally interesting, but for me, it kind of looks fortressy. Like, I don't want to go in it, but that's my personal perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
I really like the design. I think it looks really good. The canopy trellis, a little cool on, maybe with a few architectural words I know is brutalist, feels to me, but I couldn't even design, living rooms. I did notice, I had a comment, the south side does look a little plain, and I know it's a utility area, but that driveway is taking up a lot of space. If you look down on it, I wondered if it was possible to consider some permeable paving there, because it is just quite a bit of square footage if you, for the site overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Norris, or Commissioner Norris, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Commissioner Natami, sorry.
Oh, housing, okay. When we talked about the dog park a little bit while ago, I want to be really careful when you say that, oh, well, Met Park's across the street. One of the big complaints about Met Park is that that park in the middle ended up devolving down into essentially a dog run, and that it wasn't being able to be used by the residents the way I think it originally been envisioned. So let's be really careful about saying, oh, well, there's always Met Park there, you can have the dogs go there. That's not going to get you anywhere if you raise it further at Planning Commission. Just be aware of that.
Good advice, thank you.
Okay. I, and for my part, agree with the positive feedback about the tabletop. I like that. I actually respectfully disagree with Ms. Van Hine. I like the pejorative term is imposingness, but I don't see it as imposing. I see it as defining space, the way that some of the people at the table have said. I really appreciate the work that has been done to maintain the sense of the Americana, and I would like to know a little bit more about the weird situation involving the marks. It's not on the inventory, so I don't know like the extent to which preserving any of the historical aspects of the building would actually count for anything in the way of bonus density. That's a question not for tonight, but one that might become apparent, depending on how much people seem to care about the brand of the hotel as opposed to just like the space, the shape it took up. But maybe it's just not my business, which is fine. Or like not Arlington's business, which is fine. But it doesn't seem to me, something is off about the trademark. There are geographical issues. There are definitely distinctiveness issues. I think we were told that it was owned by some family in California, which raises the question of whether or not it's being used in commerce, right? In a way that like seems like it could be acquired, but I don't know that asking the applicant to spend the resources on fighting that like actually does anything for Arlington's historic preservation goals. You know, Mr. Aiken, maybe at our next meeting, that's something that you and your colleagues can give us some guidance over, because everything is a trade-off, and it's not on the inventory, and so I guess I'm saying I kind of want to look to y'all and others about whether or not this is something we want to ask the applicant to spend a whole lot of time on, or I think Commissioner Sarli, you identified a bit of a tension between the historical preservation goals and the building that was designed. I think that Ms. Spadoni spoke to that, but like it could be that the applicant is at a point where they just say we've done enough and we don't need that, because the community is to an extent already decided that. So that's my comment. Please no one hear me as saying that the community has decided we don't need it. All I'm saying is that that's implicit in it not being the inventory, and we may disagree when we come down to the commission hearings. So that's my comment on that. Mr. Aiken, your hand is still up. I want to go back to you if you have a separate thing. If you just forgot to bring it back down, we'll move on.
No, I was just going to mention, I think that's a very worthwhile point to make, and I'm going to actually try to write that down and get back to you about that, especially considering the resources, because I think that's actually worth noting for maybe the next time.
Thank you. We are then going to, unless there's anything else, go to our third topic, which is open space and landscaping. Mr. Castle, your hand was up, it's down.
Yeah, I did have one more question.
Okay.
Our comment is that I like the canopy, or tabletop, wherever you want to call it, from the front. But what about the Route 1 side? The Route 1 side, from an architectural point of view, looks, I mean, there's a little bit of the building, but if they could explain a little bit more about that from the Route 1 side, I think that's also important, because that's supposed to be a major street. So what does it look like from the Route 1 side? And can you give us a little bit of color on that? That would be helpful.
Can we briefly pull up that that rendering, and then I want to also treat that generally as a comment for follow-up at the next meeting. But I think we can still pull it up just to show Mr. Castle. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So we are looking at the Route 1 side. One thing I'd like to say is that we like to think that none of our villages really have a back, and this one really beckons to that. There isn't a side that is using a less expensive material or anything. The expression is going around on all four sides. Even though we have we obviously have a loading area on the south that you've picked out that is, pointed out that is a challenging area on the building to make beautiful, because it is also have to serve a function. It's not just art, which is what's so amazing about architecture, is that you actually have to use it. But that means that I just want to say that, that we really spent the time to really think through the visibility of this site. We tried really hard not to make it have a back to the building. We're treating the facade on Eads and Richmond Highway exactly the same in the terms of the tower form. We are working through that podium expression. We don't feel that Richmond Highway in its current conditions warrants anything like the tabletop, where it's the address of the building, the main entrance of the building, so it will be treated differently. But we by no means are considering Richmond Highway a back or this is a very visible portion of the site. We want it to be just as spectacular as Eads. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go? We have no hands up for open space and landscaping, so I'm going to go starting with questions from Commissioner Lentellman.
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Wood?
So open space landscaping, I have a couple of questions. And maybe the first one is the biggest one, which is, why did you decide not to go for the green building initiative and all of those, what in the terms of open space and landscaping that the green building incentive program would have the applicant do, are you not doing? And you may not know the answer to that. But I mean, that is an Arlington program. You have no idea what I'm talking about. I can see.
No, I don't know if you had a response. I think that's one we had Commissioner Lewitt for next time. I think that was on the agenda with community benefits and some of the other, so we don't have all
So we
the
can
folks
talk
here, but we'll
about
put that down absolutely as
Right, and I
something
know,
we're ready to answer.
so then this is just a purely factual question that I think you may have changed. So there were those earlier discussions about the 12 trees that weren't accessible publicly or privately. Can you tell me more about that?
So we're talking about the trees that were on the back side of the
I
building?
guess,
or-
it just says they're not accessible publicly or privately. You know, are they in like floating in a glass bubble?
No, I think you're talking about on the east and then the south sides of the building. And so they are not necessarily publicly accessible. Residents would be able to kind of walk around those areas, but it's not a programmed
It's
amenity.
not like a promenade, but you know, it's not like they're behind a brick wall. You can get in and out.
Correct. And depending on what happens with the future Richmond Highway, that the ones that are on the south side, on the east side, actually may be part of the streetscape design.
Good. Okay, and then we talked, I know that bird-friendly glass is being held over as part of the sustainability discussion. What about the glare? I mean, I've heard concerns about glare off these glass buildings. Maybe that doesn't go to you as landscape, but that is sort of related to the glass and all of that.
Well, it is enough. One thing is that there is a punched opening building. So there are a lot of solid elements that will be helping with that. So it's not a very glassy office building that's going to create a lot of glare on the highway from that. And then, you know, we have to consider when we select our glass type that we are along a highway and what that will do when the sun hits the building. So we will be taking that into consideration later when we're starting to work on the exact specifications of the building material.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Wall, I will get to you. I'm going to go to Commissioner Sarli next.
I am good, thank you.
Commissioner Slack.
I'm good on open space.
Stockwell.
Question, we have not talked very much about what you're doing on the north side of the building. A little bit unclear to me what you're planning with that. I'm assuming that the north side is going to be mostly shaded and it's not going to get a whole lot of sun. So what are you doing? I understand the connector, the corridor. So you're expecting pedestrians and cyclists, I guess, to use that, or?
So for the future condition, yes, that would be a corridor connecting. For the primary condition before, there would be access to the fitness area, and then we also have some gate entrances into our fitness deck area. We are on the north side of our pathway. There's going to be a grade change, and so we are looking at providing some green screen trellis to help soften that walkway and help kind of screen out the hardscape that's happening on the other adjacent property. And then once we get to the amenity area, you're right, it's going to be very shady. So we'll dial in the proper plant material to accommodate that.
Is there any opportunity for additional plantings like garden type shrubs or something?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned a couple of amenities in the penthouse area. I'm curious, what were you talking about?
So on the second level, it's basically, and this is the East Street side, we have seating areas primarily that are adjacent to the interior amenity space. On the penthouse level, there are two spaces. The one that's on the west side will include outdoor dining area. We have outdoor grill stations, a fire feature with a fountain feature kind of combined, and a lot of different areas, different places for people to sit. And then on the east side, we've got a pool deck that's at grade and so accessible. And we've also got an outdoor kitchen and dining area, and then multiple areas that people can do, different groups can gather and sit.
Okay, thanks.
Follow-up question to your question. How do the residents get to the trees that are in the east quarter of the project?
On the south and east?
Yeah, the ones that are kind of secluded on the east side. So how do residents get there?
So at this point, really the only way, there are a couple of private terraces that could have walkouts on the south side. There's also the doorway that comes out next to the loading and that would connect to our dog, what we're calling our dog relief area. And so, there'll be a pathway kind of leading adjacent to the dog relief area.
And what would keep the general public from going back there?
I think this is something we're still kind of studying because
And do you care?
it's a balance. It's a balance of, just privacy and security, but as well as maintenance and, just residential access. We're still studying it.
I guess that I was all fired up to go ask for the pedestrian route, but then I saw your revised presentation. I think the landscape design is really nice on the north side. And I do like that porosity because these are really long walks. And we're trying to figure out how to activate Richmond Highway and the more connection we can get, the better. So thanks for that.
It's a good reason.
Yeah. No other.
Commissioners, I'm going to go to Mr. Wall and then Commissioner Lumen. I'll come back to you.
Oh, this is just me leaning on my chin.
Oh, okay. Mr. Wall, do you have something?
Just a couple of questions. I was noting in the open space and landscaping that those 12 trees we keep referencing, and then the 3 trees in front are being counted as part of the tree canopy, which is about, I guess, calculating about 18%. I was just confirming that was still in the plans with the 3 in the front and then the 12 that seem they're getting distributed along the east and the south side. Is that correct?
So our target goal is the 17.6, I believe, was what Urban Forestry assigned to us. And so we're counting ground level trees, the street trees, as well as the ones that be surrounding the property, but we're also counting roof trees that are on the roof amenity levels. So on the penthouse, we've got, in those amenity spaces, we also have a number of trees that we're counting.
Okay. I think I rounded up. And then a question, so we're talking about this outside space, and maybe I'm kind of crossing lines here, but is there anything planned to connect the new construction with the Bartlett due to the fact that we're proposing using parking in that apartment complex? Is the vision people will walk out to the eaves and then come into the building, or is there anything thought about that's going to connect those two properties, along that north walkway?
The Bartlett is actually a block north of here, so it's about between 500 and 600 linear feet away. So we'll provide maybe some more detail on the access specifically on that block and the sidewalk, but the block just to the north, I just want to make sure you're aware, is the Empty Suites Hotel.
Okay.
Directly adjacent, it's just a block up.
All right, I guess in what I was reading, it sounded like it was adjacent, but it's not really adjacent. It's one building away. Okay, got it.
A couple buildings, but it's yeah. It's,
one block.
Yeah, one block.
Okay.
I had told people we'd go around 2 times. That was sort of a mix of comments and questions, but I still want to give everyone an invitation to. I'm not seeing anyone taking me up on it. A question, going back to the easement, and I don't know if this is from Mr. Whitmore or Mr. Lamb. What precedent would there be for not getting an easement in place on either the north or south, at all, as between either the north or south side? What, like if there was a decision by the applicant to move forward without, without an easement in place, right? Either, to Mr. Lamb, is there any precedent for that, the staff, under which the staff would recommend the board proceed without the easement in place as a condition? And then, similarly to Mr. Whitmore, is there any precedent that you're aware of that you would cite in support of moving forward without an easement contra a recommendation from staff, a hypothetical, that there be an easement in place?
Sure. Well, I can answer first because I do not know of one off the top of my head, but I can take a look.
Okay. I mean, the leading point there is make sure there's an easement, right? But but the strong suggestion is if you're going to not want one, right? I mean, obviously the commission is going to.
Dana, I think the only wrinkle might be the timing in the way that the condition is written. To the extent that Route 1 were to never happen, we might have got it a little bit differently, but I think we hope it happens, right? But
that's a fair point.
So yeah, it might be a detail in the way that that's drafted.
I imagine that there can be conditions subsequent in the, embedded in the CO or something. Okay.
Certainly precedent for that.
Then on the vegetation, right? Not necessarily the trees, but the renderings which we've seen, which are beautiful, are full of not like plants, right? Of non-tree plants. I mean, we've got trees and plants hanging off of ledges. We've got just a really beautiful set of renderings. And not to pick on y'all, because you just happen to walk into the room at a moment when a number of people are getting concerned about very beautiful renderings that only a few years later are concrete walls. So the question maybe the question is to Mr. Ladd, maybe the question is Lamb, maybe the question is to Mr. Whitmore. What can be done either in terms of the language of the conditions or something else to try to arrest this trend of concrete wall of very beautiful renderings turning into concrete walls within a decade?
Well, I can start, and we have been cognizant of that, right? I've been involved in a few of those, right, where we've heard concerns from the commissions and from the board about those renderings. So we have discussed internally and made it clear that, look, what we're showing and what we ultimately show, right, at the end of the day, when we go to the board, needs to be places where we feel confident that we can provide for greenery to actually be there.
As an operational concern.
As an operational concern. That being said, right, it is difficult when you look at conditions, because conditions are kind of either or, right? You shall do this or you don't do this. And if for whatever reason, we think and we use our best judgment and think these plants can survive in this area, and for whatever reason they do not, if that's written in a condition, that's then a violation that can trigger all kinds of other issues. At the very least, going back to the board to make revisions and spend several months on that. So we are sensitive to the concern about that, but I don't see a clear path to putting that in the conditions other than you're cautioning to the applicants, let's be realistic about what we're putting into our renderings.
Right, I will say, I guess more recently in terms of kind of the standard condition language, we recognize that, renderings might not be the ultimate, what's ultimately put in the ground. So I think specifically in terms of, significant enhanced landscaping features like a green wall, that is something we've started to incorporate in condition language. But that's only for, specific enhanced landscaping features. And if there's something with this project that kind of rises to that level, it is something we would kind of explore to make sure it kind of gets ultimately.
There are also a number of conditions where the existence of an operational plan is the condition, right? I'm just sort of thinking ahead to what the commission discussion, deliberately not trying to forecast anything other than make sure that you have that easement. But I'm not, we're not the board. All we can do is advise. I'm going to go around the room and invite people to do one quick follow-up comment, and then I'm going to do a very, very brief wrap-up, and then then open for any public comment that we might have. I think we've got one individual. Do we have anyone online?
I think Stacy.
Stacy Meyer. Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Do we have any hands up? Mr. Castle, wrap-up comments? I think you're on mute, Mr. Castle.
Sorry. This site is very small, so it's very hard to imagine how much landscaping you really can have and how significant it can be, because there's not much land. That was trying to get at my question before, is how much land is actually going to be in this landscaping area? So, but at the same time, the view from Route 1 or from the side with landscaping is kind of confused, and I'm kind of disappointed in that sense. But I understand that there's not much room. You're kind of building the whole site. And so, but overall, there's just not much landscape. So, I mean, that's kind of, you know, either like it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. Mr. Wall.
Yeah, I wanted to thank the folks for making some of the adjustments that we had identified earlier. That's really helpful to see that moving along. And just sort of setting out there, we definitely have other topics to cover with regards to the community amenities, sort of traffic in the area and things like that. And I know we will be discussing that at our next meeting. I really look forward to hearing what the answers are for that. And I'm thanks again for the staff report. That's also helpful to understand what the staff is thinking about and what are still open items. So I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. Commissioner Lantoni.
Yeah, looks good. I have no further comments for tonight.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewin.
I really, again, appreciate the changes that have been made. I thought this was a very helpful meeting tonight. Just previewing for the next meeting, where I know sustainability will be a big issue, and the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission sent a list of questions asking for more information. You guys have seen our chart where we try to, so I just wanted to know if you think you'd be able to provide that.
Yes. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
We've been working on it, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Sauer.
Thank you. I'd like to commend the applicant and the design team. It's been a good team to work with in the past. It's a pleasant experience, you know, and aside from all the criticism and comments, I think the process is generally, it's just so good when you guys are receptive to comment, you know, and it just makes the whole thing very easy. So I just want to really appreciate, thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Slott.
Commend you on the east-west path, huge improvement. Really hope we get to connect to something on the other side, but that's not your problem, that's our problem. And I look forward to the next meeting. I think we got a little bit of a preview. I would definitely love to understand a little better at meeting 2, how somebody with a bike actually gets from outside into the bike parking and back out, and how they open what seems to be a fairly large number of doors in between. While holding the bike. I share Ms. Van Hein's utter confusion on what the streetscape is actually proposed here. It seems to say 8 feet someplace, 10 feet other places. So I look forward to getting that all figured out at meeting 2. But this is a huge improvement already, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Suckwell.
I had, excuse me, I had some project. Really appreciate your receptiveness to suggestions too. Would like to see more specifics on where you intend to use bird-friendly glass. Also, any specifics you can provide on opportunities for rooftop gardens or terrace gardens or just more green. The renderings, as Commissioner Weir said, are so attractive. You just sort of had a tendency to zone out and say, well, there's just going to be some nice plants there. But it would be nice to tie down more specifics about how you actually intend to exercise any landscaping opportunities you do in that site.
Thank you, Ms. Van Hine.
First, I'd like to thank the chair and staff for being able to come against PRC's greatest PRC, and thank the applicant and the supporting staff. It's been great stuff. It's been improving. You've really been receptive to our suggestions over time, and it's really been great. And I look forward to more renditions of the and a long discussion on Pluto next time.
Including, I think, a micro Pluto issue, right? And that if people are going to be parking in an offsite, if their parking spot is offsite, and they're like bringing groceries home or a lot of stuff.
That's good, yeah.
How are they on site long enough to get their stuff out of their car and get their car offsite? Yeah. Sorry to go over.
No, that's a great issue.
Well, I might as well get it on the table now, right? Mr. Dow.
Yeah, I share everybody's compliments. It's really well done site. It's a tricky site, and the building looks really cool. I would be interested in a view from looking at the southeast corner corner of the building for Richmond Highway sign. I still don't really understand what that looks like. And then there is something on page 28 of your presentation, there's a dog park, and I cannot figure out what direction I'm looking at. So if you can annotate that, so, you know, east looking west.
I think it might,
It's might be park,
yeah,
okay.
we can
So it's just
clarify that,
Americana
though.
site.
Okay. That's confusing. We can
Yeah.
fix that.
Just a minuscule one on site.
Yeah, yeah, so this has Americana sites.
It's a small dog.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Norris.
Just forward to hearing more about community benefits, especially related to you asking the next one.
Community benefits, yeah, okay, that's our second item, I suppose, give it a.
Yeah, I accidentally left a thing out of my wrap-up comment, which is that I also look forward to talking about parking ratio next week, given that the Bartlett apparently has extra parking spaces. Why this parking ratio? Are we sure that this is not building too many parking spaces yet again? It's got to be a tough site to excavate that second level.
Oh, it already slopes down. It helps.
Did you have some things?
No, just the third bullet must be sustainability to go with parking, transportation, community benefits.
Okay.
I knew you had that in there in your.
So a couple of quick wrap-up comments, and then we'll get our public commenters. One thing I wanted to point out, and I think that this is a win, an example of very good innovation that came out of how we shifted to doing SPRC meetings during the pandemic. And specifically what I'm referring to is the inclusion of an open public comment period before the first SPRC meeting. That's something that we started a couple of years ago. I think that there was a lot of optimism that it was going to be helpful. And I just want to make sure everyone's aware of this meeting and one very tangible example of how it has worked out, which is the east-west connections between Eads and Richmond Highway. That was a suggestion and a request that came out specifically of that public comment window. It did not come up during the LRPC process. And so, you know, it gave the applicant and staff, but mostly the applicant, I think. I hope that that's correct. I'm sorry, Mr. Land, if it's not. Time to figure out a really important thing and come to the first SPRC meeting having made real progress getting it fixed. And so I want to call that out as an example of, I think, how the way that the county does this got better as a result of some of the innovations that we had to pick up with during the pandemic. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that. A number of things for follow-up, and I think that the high-level wrap-up is that everyone is mostly very happy with what they're seeing, with a bunch of requests for some tightening up or further information before the next meeting. Some examples are Commissioner Lantelmi's question about the easement, which I sort of endorse. A question came up about unit breakdown, although I understand, Mr. Whitmore, that this is one where that might be more of a CO issue than an entitlement issue. There was a lot of talk about historic preservation related issues. Materiality questions came up with respect to the canopy, both structural and cladding. I think that there were a number of questions broadly that come into the parking, transportation, community benefits, and sustainability topics, and I'm not going to go over those specifically other than to point to the broader topics. I'm having an issue reading my own handwriting, naturally, and I'm just going to invite, if anyone just wants to add a major theme, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I just want to invite people if there's anything that I'm missing. Other than, one other specific is that request for a southeast view. If it's not in the materials, then it's just missed it, but I also understand, I think from Ms. Spinoni, that you're still kind of working on some of these issues, right? With the southeast view, or did I hear you say that?
I'm not thinking of it.
Disregard, right? Well, okay, so it would be nice to get that rendering thing. If there are any other sort of high-level topics that I have omitted in the rendering that you would like to make sure are included in my notes for the staff meeting going to the next meeting, I welcome that. Otherwise, I think we're going to go to public comment. And should we start with Ms. Mayer?
She'll pull up the screen right now.
There's a real lag on my side. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry about that.
Hey, we're just waiting for the timer to come on the screen, and there it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, great. So thank you for letting me talk. I'm a longtime resident of Aurora Highlands. A couple of quick comments. I agreed with everything Mr. Lantelmi said about his concerns about the dog park and his positive concerns about the architecture, and agreed with Mr. Weiss's comments regarding the execution of the concept. I hope it comes out the way that the rendering is showing. It looks great. Tabletop design is a beautiful element. My only comment would be to tie it to the Americana Hotel in some way that it's more obvious. I think longtime residents of the neighborhood would really like that. I would just say that one concern regarding the trees, following up on what John was talking about, retailers tend to have a negative response to trees in front of their signage and their space. We really would hope that if that's where the trees are being planned, that they actually end up there, and that the trees are given the opportunity to thrive in the urban environment, including how you do the planter, irrigation, and tree selection. You know how to do that. With the unprecedented views of this building and the height and the density that is coming, by far our biggest concern of Aurora Highlands and our neighborhood has come and spoken about this project is what John had mentioned. Can't emphasize it enough. We here in Aurora Highlands feel flooded with development, and which is good and bad. But we feel like the county is not presenting as much on the cumulative impacts of the development. In every time we look at it, and we don't understand in a cumulative way. We haven't since 2016. Traffic, schools, community facilities, everything that's put in that Crystal City sector plan. That there's a three-party triad of partners, and one of whom is the county. And we need the county to come to the table and please help us understand what will be the impact on our community of Aurora Highlands. That is by far our biggest concern. Great job by the developer and architect.
Thank you, Ms. Mayer. Mr. Rep.
Hello. Just a couple of short comments. I thought the comment about the Route 1 positioning is an important one, because if Route 1 is not there, the building will look very different with Route 1 flat on the ground, and it will seem less monumental on that side, and may seem strange in that future world, but that's difficult to plan for. I understand the challenges of that. The East-West addition's a great addition. Would like to see more public area in that. And the last comment relates to just going from a 4.8 FAR to 8.6 without open space, without sustainability, without interesting transportation, which I guess we were about in the next meeting. Just seems like a lot of density for not a lot of community benefit. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And, did you also have?
Yeah, my name is Bucky Green. I live in Aurora Hills or Aurora Highlands. I know this isn't on your property, or at least I don't think it is, but we're building Route 1, or hopefully we will rebuild Route 1, and that's supposed to be a big grand new entrance to Crystal City and Pentagon City and the rest of the National Landing. I'm just looking to find out who to talk to or who has the technical information about trees, sunlight, and the road. Because like East Street is already dark. So I'm just saying, if we, just wondering how to understand what's going on with Route 1 so that it gets enough light so that we have some trees, unlike kind of the scraggly ones we have now. I don't see any monumental trees or 30-year-old trees along the right of way, and it's been 30 years. So I don't know who to talk to in the county. So I don't know whether this is the right place to ask that question.
Mr. Lamb, you?
We're happy to, let me, I'll grab you after. We're happy to help make a few connections. There are several working groups and others that, you know, we'll be able to provide an update and some more detail on how that's being managed. But we're part of some of those groups, but we don't obviously directly control any of that. But we have our own thoughts and I think share your concerns. So happy to connect some dots for you. Yeah.
The other reason that there isn't a straightforward answer to your question is that the Commonwealth is one of the main players, and so.
They keep referencing Bill 2. Right. So
yeah,
that's what I'm asking.
Thank you. Thank you all. The next meeting, I believe the date is TBD. Is that still correct? So the date for the next meeting is.
Other stuff I forgot.
You can always run.
So the question was asked, and I'll just make sure that everyone can hear it. It's likely to be January, no earlier than January. We've got the 4 topics. I'm sure that there'll be 1 or 2 more bullets or partial bullets that will come out, or sub bullets. With that, thank you again, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Right on time. Good job.